consent agenda this evening, and I will just read through the introductory paragraph and the items that are contained on the consent agenda. Matters included under the consent agenda are routine, self-explanatory matters and are not expected to require discussion or review. Items will be enacted by one motion. If discussion is desired by any member of the council, that item must be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. If the public wishes to speak on a matter of the consent agenda, they must inform the village clerk prior to the start of the meeting. They will be recognized to speak prior to the approval of the consent agenda. I would just like to let the council know that I have not heard from any residents in reference to any item on the agenda being requested to be pulled. And let the record reflect that Councilman Macklin has arrived. So item 1A is approval of the January 17th, 2017 council meeting minutes. Item 1B is a resolution of Miami Shores Village Council urging all Miami-Dade County municipalities to establish zoning regulations that prohibit medical marijuana dispensaries in close proximity to schools. Item 1C is an ordinance of Miami Shores Village Council, Miami Shores, Florida, establishing a temporary moratorium on cannabis dispensing businesses as further defined herein, provided for conflicts, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date. That's a first reading only, which is why it's on the consent agenda. And item 1D, an ordinance of Miami Shores Village Council, Miami Shores, Florida, relating to short-term vacation rentals, providing a definition of a vacation rental, requiring a license to operate a vacation rental, providing standards for issuance and revocation of a vacation rental license, requiring insurance for a vacation rental, providing standards of operations, providing for penalties for violations of this section, providing for severability, providing for conflicts, and providing for an effective date. Once again, that's a first reading, which is why it's under the consent agenda.
Madam Mayor,
Yes, Councilman.
I would like to pull item 1C and 1D.
Sorry, 1
B and 1C.
and B and 1C.
Do I have a motion on the remaining consent agenda items?
So moved. Second.
Wait a minute. We should at least have two people to tie. Take first and second.
There you go.
Okay.
Okay.
All in favor of those two items, say aye.
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 Opposed? None opposed? Okay. Item 1C. Excuse me. Item 1B. Can I just say at the outset that item 1B came about as a result of the village receiving a memo from the superintendent of schools asking that all Miami-Dade municipalities provide for this ordinance, and it was reviewed by the village attorney. And that being said, any other comment on it?
Yeah. Well, good evening. I first wanted to start by making an announcement that there are still some seats available inside if anybody sitting outside would like to come in. I count about 4 or 5. I pulled this item because I just had a lot of questions. I wanted to know who proposed this and why. So I guess I wanted to start with that. I'm asking. Okay. Yeah, my question is who proposed this and why was it proposed?
The item,
Item B and C, 1B and 1C.
Councilwoman Ledesma, I'm going to speak to as to how 1B came about. It was received through the fact that we now have an education compact with the district. They make an effort. Can you hear me now? Okay. They make an effort to communicate with the municipalities on issues related to schools. This item came with a letter from the superintendent encouraging all municipalities to enact this ordinance. It then went to the village attorney. I believe he made a few changes to the language.
Yeah, actually, it's a resolution, not an ordinance, and we tweaked it so that we were not requesting the legislature to impose requirements on municipalities. We were urging the municipalities to take care of their own business.
So just for clarification purposes, so is this a resolution that you're proposing, Madam Mayor?
I'm proposing it, yes.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay, so, was this in the minutes of the, compact of the Education Advisory Commission?
No, it was not part of the education compact. It came out as a mailing to all municipalities in Miami-Dade County from the superintendent,
Okay.
as is his want to inform the cities of issues affecting all Miami-Dade County public schools.
Okay. And so, in the resolution, it says that medical marijuana products, on school property without administrative supervision, as deemed, and as is prohibited, as deemed appropriate by school districts. So is this something, is marijuana, according, I'm asking the attorney this, according to our state law, is medical marijuana illegal for children to have?
There are two answers to that. One, I haven't studied the status of the medical marijuana, and number two, the status of medical marijuana is changing daily. They had public hearings today to receive comments on the rules that are going to govern that.
Okay.
So I don't know that it's even answerable.
Okay, so we have this before us, and, you know, my hope was definitely that you would be prepared and to answer these, you know, any questions regarding medical marijuana.
I'm available anytime you want to call me and ask me a question. I'll look up anything you want to know.
Okay, no, I understand that and I appreciate it, but we're doing it in public here because it's before us. So, you know, personally, I don't think we're ready to pass this sort of resolution, especially if we don't have an understanding of what the state law is going to be. And it seems a little bit like we're preempting something, which we don't know any rules regarding it. Now, I'm not to say that I am for marijuana being on school premises. Absolutely not. That is not my intention. My intention is to get clarity and also to make sure that we understand fully what the state law will be before our municipality takes a stand on it. So it's basically my comments on Resolution 1B. I don't know if anybody else would like to say something about it.
Madam Mayor, my understanding is this is a resolution that would just basically urging municipalities in their zoning regulations to prohibit medical marijuana dispensaries in close proximity to schools, the same way that liquor stores are prohibited from being in close proximity to schools. It has nothing to do with the policy of the school and what they allow on their school grounds. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. I mean, I'll move the resolution.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, this is a first reading.
No, it's a
No, it's a resolution.
Okay, so this is a resolution, I'm sorry. So that, I'll go ahead and call the question. All in favor of the resolution, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Thank you, Barbara.
Yes.
That one is an ordinance.
Thank you. Yeah, so I would like to start with my first question, which is, you know, who proposed this and why?
Well, my understanding was it came out of Tom's office. I helped draft it, but we talked about whether or not we were in a position to enact rules and zoning guidelines for medical marijuana before we knew what all of the regulations that the state was going to adopt were. I think there's, last count maybe, was it something like 18 municipalities that have adopted moratoria so that we could have the time necessary to do the research necessary to enact zoning rules if we so chose. And this is an ordinance to basically put in place a similar moratorium to those enacted by many other municipalities in South Florida and elsewhere.
Thank you. Okay,
Okay, so
Councilwoman Desmond?
just to understand this ordinance, this is will prohibit anybody from setting up a business in their home. Is that correct?
If enacted, On second reading, this would impose a moratorium for the duration listed on the opening of cannabis dispensing businesses in the village.
Okay. So is this, it seems to me that if anybody wanted to open up a business in their house, they wouldn't be able to because we have ordinances that prohibit such activities, businesses. Can you clarify what the code is around home businesses?
Certain home businesses are indeed allowed in the residential districts with limitations.
So which ones, so such activities such as animal hospital, barbershop, beauty parlor, clinics, hospital, or a similar use shall now be deemed to be a home occupation.
I'm sorry, I don't know what you're reading, but I don't see how a hospital can be a home occupation.
Right, I understand that. I'm reading a section of the code that addresses home occupations.
Which section?
Not sure. I looked it up and I didn't write down the section, but
I'm not sure. I think we have a separate category for home occupations.
okay. So,
But what's the question?
so the question is, isn't that already prohibited as far as residential is concerned? A home dispensary business.
You mean a marijuana dispensing business out of someone's home?
Yes.
Don't know. Have to look at it. Some of the restrictions that we have include you can't have employees, things like that. So some businesses might be prohibited, some businesses might not. The point is, right now, we don't have any regulations addressing marijuana dispensaries because of the status of the law prior to the last constitutional amendments.
So your answer is that you don't know if right now our charter does not allow dispensary.
Well, the charter doesn't enter into it.
Our ordinances, our codes, does
Here's,
not allow.
here's what staff's position is. We have no provisions addressing it. If the way our code is set forth, we set forth the permitted uses for various properties. And if it's not listed in the permitted, then it's excluded.
Okay,
You
so
understand that?
it's not listed and permitted, so therefore it's excluded. So so home dispensaries would be excluded according to our ordinances as it's written right now.
That would be
As we
staff's
understand.
interpretation. We'd like time to study what's coming out of the legislature and the, I'm not sure which department it is in Tallahassee that's holding these hearings, but once they get the local regulations in place, we'd like to look at that and then address it in our code.
I understand that, but we could also, could the city also deny any permits since it's not listed or drafted in our ordinances?
If someone applied to open up one, I think we could deny that. But you say a permit. Permits are for like in
For a business establishment.
Without getting into semantics with you, I think it would be difficult to open one in the village under the current regulations.
Okay.
But we'd like, as I understand it, the point of this is we would like to adopt some regulations to address this. As the laws change, we want to update the code, but we need some time to do it.
Okay, so my question is to the person who proposes, so what exactly is the fear, and what are we trying to accomplish by adopting this ordinance?
Well, I'll answer if nobody else wants to answer it. I'm not aware of any fear. I'm just, as I explained, we want to put everything on hold, status quo. I don't want us to be sued by somebody who applies and is denied a permit. And the moratorium is the accepted way of getting the time that we need to study the issue and adopt appropriate regulations. That's all that's being proposed on first reading.
Okay, but you just said that the standard has been, if it's not if it's not written in the code, it usually says that they're exempted from the code.
The longstanding position of staff is that we list what's permitted. If it's not listed as permitted, it's prohibited. Did I get that right?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, I'm
Okay.
asking the planning director.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, I think one of the problems is that the state statute, if I read it correctly, says cities are not allowed to prohibit. If you look at our code, some may come to the conclusion that we prohibit it. So rather than run afoul of state law, what we need to do is you would need to put in a moratorium and actually come up with requirements for whether or not we are going to regulate them. So I think that's, my fear is not so much they're coming or not coming. It's just simply that because of the way the state statute's written, we have the potential to run afoul of state law unless we have a moratorium that gives us time to decide what regulations we will have, as opposed to telling somebody that they can or can't have it. I think that's where I would come down on it.
It was the judgment of staff that it's better to take the time to study it and enact the necessary regulations than it is to just say, we have a blanket prohibition and wait for someone to sue us.
Okay,
Because
great.
of state law.
And
Because of anything.
so what happens after the 12 months?
The hope is, within those 12 months, we will be back before you with a set of proposed regulations. But step one is we'd like to know what the state's going to provide in their regulations, which, as I said, they're still hammering it out. There was a meeting, I think, in Fort Lauderdale today for public comment.
I think the dilemma is they already passed a law that potentially could put us in conflict. At the same time, they didn't come up with the following laws that would actually tell us what it is we're supposed to do. And so that's the dilemma we're in. We're sitting there in a no man's land where there's, we have regulation or we don't, and we can't seem to kind of tie in with the state because they're not ready for us, and yet they've already said we can't prohibit it. So there's a very complex issue there, and I'm not an attorney, so I mean, I'd leave it to our attorney to try to figure that one out.
Again, we're not reinventing the wheel here. The bulk of cities that have looked at this have decided to do the moratorium route. That's what we've recommended.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. DeQuesta.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
In this particular case, I think this is a very prudent course of action. I mean, what I'm hearing from staff, and I applaud them for bringing this in front of us without any of us initiating it, because they're trying to protect us. They're trying to protect the village and the taxpayers from what could be a very costly lawsuit. As Mr. DeQuisto said, basically, this matter is preempted by state law. All right? If I came in tomorrow, filed a permit application, and the village said no, I think I'd have a very good chance of winning that lawsuit.
Well, don't say that. Whether you'd have a good chance of winning or not, it would be an expensive lawsuit.
It would be an expensive lawsuit, certainly. So, and we're only on first reading.
Yeah.
So, I'm at a loss as to why we shouldn't just move forward with this at this point. I'll certainly make a motion to approve the ordinance on first reading.
Motion and a second.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I would definitely like to hear from the public, and we also did not hear from the public on the prior matter that we voted on.
Point of order.
Yes,
Under consent agenda,
yes.
because it's consent agenda, even if you pull the item, the public comment is not required, because they would have had to come forward before the meeting and ask to have the item pulled. So, because you pulled it, it's in order for council to discuss it, but there's no requirement of public comment, it's first reading.
Okay, but they can, we can allow for
That's up to
public
the
comment. Okay.
She's running the meeting.
And of course, there will be public comment before second reading.
Again, I think this is an ordinance on first reading that is protecting the village from potentially an expensive lawsuit. If you want to have public comment, that's fine, but, obviously there's going to be public comment at second reading, and the ordinance may change between now and then, so people are commenting on something that may not even be what we ultimately are going to act on.
Thank you, and that was my understanding as well. Is it okay? I think we should go ahead and call the question. All in favor of the ordinance, item 1C, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None opposed. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item is appointment to the Code Enforcement Board. This is a vacancy that was brought about by the Manny Carolla coming off the board, he moved, and it was after the last round of appointments.